Hey everyone, hopefully you're having a good day. My name's Andy. My channel is Finding Value. Today we're going to talk about electric vehicles. Look at how these things are being adopted, see how well they're doing in terms of people sticking with them, those who have bought in electric vehicles, and just kind of get a good idea of how fast electric vehicles could potentially be adopted, or at least the opinions of other people to see how fast they could be adopted. So let's jump in here. I've got, are we on the brink of an electric vehicle boom only with more action? This was written in September 16th, 2021. It says, given the EV sales only accounted for 4% of new passenger vehicle sales globally in 2020, these benchmarks could seem incredibly ambitious. As EV prices continue to fall and more models become available, it is possible we are nearing a critical tipping point with EVs poised for exponential growth in an increasing number of countries over the next decade under the right conditions. If action continues to build, 2030 and 2035 targets could be within reach. EVs and the S curve. So similar to other value-creating technologies in the past, experts agree that growth in sales of electric vehicles is likely to follow an S curve or market diffusion curve. Progress along an S curve comes in stages. At first, when the technology is newly invented, growth is slow and uncertainty is high. However, technology costs fall and complementary infrastructures developed, a tipping point may be reached which causes adoption to grow exponentially. As more actors gain confidence in and adopt the new technology, growth reaches its top speed and slows and levels out as the new technology becomes dominant in the market. What does that look like? It says possible pathway for passenger electric vehicles to align with the 1.5 degree Celsius goal. This is the EV share of global new passenger vehicles here and your timeline. Historically, in the gray, this is what they've got, and I'm sure this is going to ramp up some. Then they've got this going all the way up to over 80% as the benchmark and close to 100% by 2035. So they think this S curve is going to be quite dramatic. It says the hypothetical S curve showing what's needed to meet 2035 benchmark. So that's what's needed. This is what they want. This is what a perfect adoption, so to speak, would look like. I've got another chart over here. Back out just a little bit. It says key milestones in the exponential growth of electric vehicle sales. This is deployment milestone, key change agent, policy, and cost. So when looking at this is the 2010 to 2020. This is only a little bit greater than 4% for electric vehicle share of global new passenger vehicle sales. These are the early adopters, and then we start to go vertical. It says we've got a whole bunch of different things going on here, but this is the growth in passenger new vehicles in sales. So the one thing I'll say here is I've been looking at the materials and which materials are going to prevent this from happening. So I'm kind of taking a two-phase approach here. A lot of people think that electric vehicles they're going to come about and everyone's going to adopt them. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. But I can tell you there's a lot of things between how many vehicles we can produce and the materials that we have in front of us. I think that we could potentially run into copper problems, nickel problems, cobalt problems, graphite problems, lithium problems, and it goes on and on and on and on. There's a lot of potential problems that could get between this, I'll call it this adoption curve right here, and reality. Now, they're talking about shortages just in this ramp up here, in the beginning of it. Not anything on this back end. Now, they're going to have to completely change the electric vehicle if they want to design out and put in some sort of, we'll call it replacements for a lot of these materials. I don't know if it's possible. I even think silver would be a potential problem if we try to ramp electric vehicles alongside renewables. What you're going to find out is that we're going to have to mine a lot more minerals of the minerals that these guys need. It will be a super cycle. Here's the problem, though. A lot of people or a lot of countries, people, communities, however you want to say it, they don't want mining in their backyard. And a lot of these areas where the metals are at aren't necessarily here in America. They're all scattered throughout the world. And some of those areas are not very friendly to America or the United States. So it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to pull off all of these minerals and not have them have incredibly large deficits, which will basically push the price of EVs far higher than where they are today. I mean, it's very easy to build a low volume amount of EVs with commodities being plentiful, especially during a disinflationary cycle of a recovery phase of real estate. Things I think are going to get a lot more difficult and a lot more expensive in an expansionary phase under an inflationary condition where commodity prices are rocketing higher, and then the pressure of the supply-demand balance of those commodities themselves. So I'll see what happens, but I guess I'm betting, on oil, and that the adoption of this will be slow. Keep in mind that cars are some of the largest purchases that people have. If you purchase a newer car, you're not going to sell it right when EVs come out. You're going to run it. You'll probably run it till, I don't know, maybe at least 5 to 12 years, at least. I think the average is people are pushing their cars to 12 years, which means, you've got people pushing it 15, 16 years. The cars that I own, my newest car is a 2005. So I'm at 16, 17 years on my car. I'm going to run it as long as I can. And I have another car in 04, and I've got some other cars that aren't. But those are the two I use for daily driving, an 04 and an 05. And I think I could milk another 5, maybe even 10 years out of it, depending on how much I drive. And I won't be selling it. I'm just going to run it. There's no point in me buying something new. Gas would have to be astronomically high for me to cost justify buying anything else, like a hybrid or something else. And the more electronics you put on a car, the less I want it. I just want something basic. A to B transportation. I don't want things breaking on me. I'm cool with roll up and down windows. I'm cool with all that stuff. Manual transmission. I don't want complexity drives unreliability. The more electronics you have on something, the less I seem to want it. I want basic cars, super lightweight, either very good mileage or very good performance. I like all the stuff out of the cars. That's just me, a true performance-minded person. So here's another. We got some other stuff. So here's the reality check. The pace to mass adoption of electric vehicles will be glacial. That's what they say. It says the entire industry will need to be transformed. Car companies will need to adopt, and charging stations will need to be erected across the country. The reality is that the path to electrification is thorny, and the pace will likely be slower than many expect. Investors and automotive industry players alike may not see returns as quickly as the BEV hype machine would suggest. The other big obstacle to widespread adoption is range anxiety, particularly in rural areas, created by batteries and the current dearth of nationwide network of fast charging stations that will be key to resolving it. But pace of that change will be far more gradual and less smooth than many news headlines suggest, meaning that the internal combustion engine will continue to dominate U.S. roads for decades to come. This has widespread implications. Less than 2% of the 285 million light vehicles on U.S. roads today are battery electric vehicles, and many years will pass before they surpass the number of internal combustion engine vehicles in operation, even though sales are rising each year. By 2040, only about 25 to 35% of vehicles on the road are expected to be fully electric. An electric future is coming, but let's be thoughtful about the pace of this significant change and consider the ramifications of unrealistic, premature expectations, as well as the opportunities presented during this evolution. One thing I want to make the comment in is a lot of people think that oil is just going to be pushed to the side and that these will be adopted. Now, even if we have that type of adoption, 25 to 35% in America, And even if it's 25, 30%, I don't know if this is worldwide or America, but let's say it is worldwide. At the same time, you're in the middle of an S curve of the adoption of energy and oil in third world countries where the majority of the population is. I have a feeling that oil is going to get incredibly expensive because of that. And EVs, I think, will go up as oil prices go up. Their input costs and their commodity costs, they are much more subject to input costs with the commodities increasing than internal combustion engines. And then you have to look at some other things I'm going to talk about and how people either like or dislike EV vehicles, and some facts that I thought were kind of cool. So it says 20% of EV buyers go back to gas-powered vehicles. We hear it, and this was written in 2021. It says, we hear it all the time from EV buyers. Once I get my insert make electric vehicle, I was sold and will never go back to an internal combustion car. We're sure you have to, whether you drive one or the other, or both. But now a study shows that 1 in 5, 20% electric vehicle owners goes back to an ICE vehicle after owning an EV. Those that had an EV as their only form of transportation will most likely switch back. If home charging was difficult, we're also likely to go back to ICE vehicles. And that group could also take in those who make less money, since it usually takes an added amount to install a home charging system. People who rent their homes are less likely to pay for home charging stations, and especially those who don't have to resort to street parking have no dedicated place to install a system. So in those cases, public charging is the only alternative, which isn't always convenient. But the research also raised other questions. It found that female EV buyers switched back more often than men, though it gave no reason why. And for those with EVs, improvements in public charging infrastructure didn't matter much. For those, it found that people tended to use their EVs for short distance travel. This questions the rationale after the huge planned investments in infrastructure over the next decade. Will it even make a difference? And will it jolt EV adoption, which is still at a low overall acceptance? Now you may think that the workaround would be just to go to public charging stations, where you can quickly add miles of range back into your EV, but the study found that at those questioned, some 2/3 said they never use public charging. The reason why they opted not to use public chargers is not specified, though. It would have provided valuable extra insight into why they were avoided. So 20% switch back if it's their only vehicle. Why? Because you can't make long distance trips very easily. Then the majority of people don't even use public charging stations. They 2/3 said they've never even used one that own electric vehicles. They do it all at home. So here's the question that's going to be very difficult. If more people can't afford to buy a house, and more people either rent, I would say rent, they're not going to install this stuff in their house. So they're probably not going to buy an electric vehicle car. There's a lot of barriers to entry for electric vehicles. Now, what could change this all around? Longer range batteries or vehicles, and batteries that can charge very quickly. I think that would be the game changer. If they can figure that out, that would be a game changer. But then you're also stuck with limitations on mineral inputs. A lot of people think, oh, well, we'll put rooftop, solar on rooftop, everybody's rooftop. I don't know if that's possible, because we only have so much silver in this world. If everybody purchased in America, if everyone purchased 2 ounces of silver, we would run out the entire world's production. That's just 2 ounces. Now, if we put solar on rooftops, we don't have enough silver for it. You're dedicated 2 ounces per person in only America, and we're going to put solar panels on everything? No, it's not going to happen. We'll have to find an alternative to silver. We'll have to find an alternative to aluminum, an alternative to copper, an alternative to nickel, an alternative to some of these rare earth metals, an alternative to graphite, an alternative to cobalt, an alternative to iron. We're running, we're going to have to find alternatives for half of the minerals on the periodic table. It's coming. And I think what would be a solution would be nuclear. because it'll save a lot of these valuable minerals. And you can very compactly and very mineral efficiently generate power with zero emissions, with the highest safety, on and on and on. It's the best of everything. So I think the gap is going to be filled by fission, then fusion at the end. We're going to have to redo our infrastructure in terms of electrical grids. And then EVs, I think they have their place, but for some reason, I think hybrids are going to win out. Only because of the ease of convenience, the ease of not having to put a whole bunch of batteries in the vehicle. I think there's going to be mineral shortages in some of these batteries. We'll see. And then I think hybrids are just overall an easier fit for most people's lives. Either if you rent, if you don't want to put in a charging station, if you don't have an electrical grid in your third world country or wherever it is, that you don't have to be reliant on it. And if, keep in mind, everything stops if we go to an electrified world, everything stops if your grid goes down. You can't travel, you can't do things. It basically is a higher risk of that type of stuff. Anyway, if you guys like the content, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And thank you for listening. This is Finding Value.